Imagine standing in the choking fog of an East Prussian marsh in August 1914. You are a commanding general, your supply lines are severed, and in every direction you look, you realize you are entirely surrounded. In the span of a few days, an entire army, tens of thousands of men, simply disappeared into these forests. They were trapped and destroyed almost to the last man. Looking at this photograph, you can see the scale of the force. This is an endless column of Russian infantrymen, and it is just a fraction of the massive military machine that had marched into this region weeks earlier. The battle that took place here, Tannenberg, turned a guaranteed Russian victory into one of the most complete military traps in history. To understand how they got trapped, we have to look at Germany's overarching war strategy, the Schlieffen Plan. This was a strict ticking clock operation designed to defeat France in the West before Russia's enormous military could fully mobilize in the East. But Russia defied those expectations. They mobilized their forces at breakneck speed, launching an early invasion of East Prussia to force Germany to pull its troops away from the French border. As this map shows, the situation for the German defenders was desperate. Two massive arrows, representing two full Russian armies, are rapidly encroaching on a very thin defensive line, representing a single, drastically outnumbered German army. This rapid offensive had the potential to crush the German homeland, but it was undermined by a series of systemic internal failures. The Russian invasion force was split into two distinct wings. General Alexander Samsonov commanded the army pushing up from the south, and General Paul von Rennenkampf led the army advancing from the east towards the north. The first major crack in their operation was psychological. Here is General Rennenkampf. He and Samsonov carried a bitter, lingering personal feud from years prior, and they reportedly despised one another. That personal divide was made worse by a geographical one. Look at the terrain between them. This chain of the Masurian Lakes and dense, sprawling forests physically drove a wedge straight down the middle of the two advancing Russian routes. When you combine slow communication with two generals whose mutual hatred makes them unwilling to coordinate, you guarantee they won't rescue each other when things go wrong. Then came the technological failure. The Russian command structure was transmitting its exact operational plans and troop coordinates over unencrypted open radio channels. A German staff officer named Max Hoffmann recognized exactly what was happening. He sat in his headquarters reading the Russian playbook in real time. This map highlights Hoffmann's response. He gambled on the Russian dysfunction, leaving only a minimal defensive force in the north to distract Rennenkampf. He bet that the bitter rivalry would keep the northern general from investigating a ghost army. Meanwhile, as you can see in this photo of German soldiers crowding into train cars, the German command utilized their advanced domestic railway network. They loaded the massive bulk of their fighting force onto trains, shifting them south to ambush Samsonov. Samsonov pushed his men onward, believing he was chasing a broken, retreating enemy. In reality, the German intelligence advantage allowed them to secretly build a cage around his entire army. Acting on that faulty intelligence, Samsonov ordered his forces deeper into the German forests, stretching his own supply lines to the breaking point. Then the trap sprang. This tactical map shows the massed German forces suddenly sweeping down in a dual pincer movement, coming around both exposed flanks and completely engulfing the southern Russian position near the village of Tannenberg. Expecting open terrain and a fleeing enemy, the advancing Russian forces instead slammed headfirst into entrenched German defensive lines, like these soldiers aiming rifles from a defensive trench. The momentum of the Russian advance broke instantly. Within a matter of hours, a forward march turned into a struggle for survival, with every possible route of retreat sealed behind them. Trapped in the dense marshland, the Russian army disintegrated. Units lost contact with commanders, ammunition ran dry, and soldiers began starving in the woods. The human toll was staggering. Tens of thousands of Russian soldiers were killed or wounded, and as this massive aerial view shows, this crowd of roughly 92,000 Russian prisoners was forced to surrender. Overwhelmed by the annihilation of his forces, General Samsonov walked alone into the woods and took his own life rather than face the Tsar. His body was never recovered. The victory turned these regional commanders into national heroes. Here are Hindenburg and Ludendorff. This partnership cemented their authority, dominating Germany's military direction for the rest of the war and shaping German politics for decades. For the Russian Empire, losing an entire army in the opening weeks of the conflict established a baseline of failure for the Eastern Front. Tannenberg was a grim omen for Russia's next 4 years, a pattern of throwing vast, brave armies into a meat grinder, doomed by poor leadership and systemic failures at a staggering human cost.